So when I contemplate the idea of, or that framing at least, beyond psychedelics, and this could be, if I were to title this particular talk or expression anything, I was thinking earlier it would perhaps be evolving contexts, although I don't necessarily want to give it any particular title, but that's a theme that is calling at me at the moment to express from. And so the context being, if we consider where the culture is at the moment, and a bit of an overview of a lot of the dynamics, the pace, the energy, the frenetic aspects of what seems to occur from day to day that our systems are all responding to. We've got a culture that is often considered to be going through a meaning crisis. And part of that, I think, is getting a bit lost when it comes to how to navigate the coming together of order and chaos within consciousness, and how we organize ourselves around a lot of the dynamics. And a lot of this involves the way we develop into an exterior kind of orientation to adapt to our developmental context, which is often our family systems and communities, and we adopt certain beliefs. And with limited energy, that goes to where it goes to. And for many people, that due to developmental circumstances disconnects them from their body, and they become unattuned to what's going on within. And this leads to certain coping patterns and default mode states. A sense of self is developed from this that has limitations and is constantly in relationship with various things, which could be very mismatched with outcomes associated with or conducive to well-being. And so my frustration for decades has always been the way in which the culture I was born into is patterned in such a way that vitality is seldom a given. It's something that you almost have to discover through deepening into your relationship with yourself and nature at large. And there are many philosophies that cut off that process. They're very anchored in content and too much order. And ultimately, there's an incentivized structure, including an academia, that develops in that direction for people. And so they play that game, and that's fine, because we do need very orderly models and ways of relating to base ourselves in as we venture out into the world. But I think evolving this context in terms of our sense of self involves the way in which possibility becomes opened through the psychedelic experience. And the beginning context might be through the scientific approach under more reductionistic metaphysics to isolate chemistry and measure the way that goes through the body, the active sites in the brain at different scales, what changes functionally and structurally in terms of the dynamic response in the brain. And there's all kinds of things that we can therefore translate into treatments and therapies in this context. But as we deepen into our own experiences of opening up both to the unconscious within and the deeper realms beyond the classical dynamics of the brain, the very non-classical resonances that occur once you arrive there, which is not a destination, it's more of a phase state that is always there, that classical states, default mode states, orientation otherwise moves us away from as part of our survival imperative and associated game theoretic objectives that we pursue. And that takes us from day to day and into careers, into ways of relating to culture and this inevitably this moment right here. And so ultimately psychedelics is like a symbol, if we were to integrate quite a lot here, of our nature with psyche, our sense of what psyche must be as a prior to all other relating. And the psychedelic might have certain variables as we look at the chemistry involved and the way that interacts with our brains and an eco kind of a context here. It might have a tendency to sort of act in a certain way, but it's really revealing to us something that is always ever present, that it's simply not conducive to survival to always experience something of that nature, we might say. And so as we evolve a bit of a context, we go from less focused on the discrete or objects in our environment, which we evolve to really isolate for survival purposes, to deepening into layers that reveal themselves, that give us a new sense of self to the degree to which we can stay in an accommodated state. So the idea from some of the European research is that the psychedelic-inspired awe can lead to a kind of an opening to more combination of these levels of what I might consider, under the right set and setting conditions, to be vitality. And so there's a process here that takes over from any sense of ontological certitude, the way our brain would normally anchor ourselves in a model of the world. And so as we open into the depths of this process and we leave behind the kind of content that structures our sense of self, I think that really affords a relationship with or discovery of the felt presence of something of a sacred nature. And this is a word that I think a lot of us educated in the university system and Western cultures struggle with in various ways. Of course, we've got conventional religions, and we can say what we can about those and the way they might manifest in problematic ways in societies, although may also afford certain ways of community belonging that are also necessary for maintaining coherence in life and families, all these kind of things. But the nature of the sacred is really key here. You know, many people have more of an intuitive sense of this, and I think one of the things that hopefully psychedelics, if anything, inspire people towards, beyond simply the healing or the insight, it's a differentiated perception. It's fairly, I guess, by reference to Jung's concept, differentiated perception. It's very much about being in that state of feeling and being and presence and awareness in a heightened manner, so that we don't simply notice our differences. We can actually feel into a deeper sense of interconnection. And interconnection and connection in general is a mode that regulates the nervous system and may optimize the free energy we can actually work with through the integrative process, knowing that we're not simply born into vulnerability and must sort of adapt to context in whatever rigid way. We can actually feel at a deeper scale that we're part of a cosmic enterprise of some kind, that, you know, it's intimately part of the nature of our being, that we're functions of this process. And so although the sacred might be described as an inexhaustible fount of intelligibility, I might reframe that as an inexhaustible fount of potentiality to manifest, to develop, to experience whatever unique conditions we're all subject to. And so there's a deepening here, and there's a relationship that's beyond language that must be given in the context of the humility that Nigel mentioned, a sense of presence in our lives. And perhaps we require certain practices and relational settings to remind ourselves of this. But that is part of what I think we're heading towards deepening into, if we're to sort of move beyond the confines that lead us into a meaning crisis. And so that is the hopeful aspect of this. The more cautious side of it is the ontological shock and the hyper novelty that can really disconnect us from a more adaptive mode of being that is fundamental to survival to some degree, and in a context that does demand things of us if we are to sort of survive day to day and use the language parts of our brain and navigate complexity accordingly. And so we are faced with many of what the wisdom traditions have referred to with humility, such as voids and dynamics that are just beyond our comprehension. And so humility, indeed, I think goes hand in hand with the sacred nature of the possibility we can all sort of experience in this context. And as the context evolves, it's about sort of being in relation to that, but also in relation to the uniqueness of being human within consciousness. So thank you for listening.